The sweetness in the Balvenie is really the taste of time touched by hand. Honey and vanilla arrive first, but behind them are hands turning barley and hands repairing casks. If you see this whiskey only as an easy, smooth single malt, you miss the most important scene. Walkie follows the trail from sweetness in the glass to the fingertips inside the distillery. The Balvenie was born in Dufftown in Speyside, Scotland. William Grant opened his second distillery next to Glenfiddich in 1892, and the first distillation is traced to 1893. Its name carries the shadow of Balvenie Castle and the land around it. But this is not a story about a younger neighbor beside Glenfiddich, but about a whiskey that turned human craft into its own identity in an age of faster whiskey. The Balvenie still sells the trace of a human hand. It makes its remaining home-grown barley floor maltings, coppersmith and on-site coopers part of the face of the brand. The malt master then chooses maturation by nosing casks and reading the whiskey over time. That is why Balvenie luxury is not only in the bottle shape, but in how far the human hand still remains. Whiskey flavor does not begin only inside oak. The hand in the Balvenie story first appears when barley is spread across the floor and turned by people. It looks like a quiet process, but that slow turning helps the grain breathe evenly. The rounded malt feel in the glass has already passed through that silent floor. The next hands move to copper stills and oak casks. The shape of a copper still changes the aroma, and the cask gives that aroma, color, and depth. That is why the Balvenie emphasizes its coppersmith and on-site cooperage. Flavor is shaped slowly between repaired copper and tightened wood before it ever becomes a bottle. David Stewart did not begin as a legendary malt master. In 1962, he joined at 17 as a whiskey stock and started by counting casks before learning their aromas. He moved from numbers in a ledger to reading a sample glass by smell. At the Balvenie, time lives not only inside casks, but also inside one person's nose. Of course, the Balvenie is not made only by hand from beginning to end. Modern whiskey is a large industry, and the distillery works inside modern production. The point is not a romantic rejection of machines, but a choice about which human touches remain. The Balvenie story is not a hand-defeating industry, but a hand that refused to disappear inside it. The Balvenie sweetness comes from two woods, not from sugar. DoubleWood 12 spends 12 years in American oak before moving for a final 9 months into European sherry casks. The first wood brings vanilla and soft spice, while the second adds fruit and honey depth. So the smoothness of the Balvenie is not weak character, but time adjusted twice. Honey, vanilla, toffee, ripe fruit, and sherry are not just pretty tasting words. They are traces left by American oak and sherry casks, pulling the spirit in different directions. That is why rounded sweetness and gentle oak spice arrive before heavy peat smoke in the familiar Balvenie profile. Follow the flavor, and you eventually return to the malting floor copper, stills, and warehouse hands. The bottle that made Balvenie famous was built by moving whiskey into another wood. David Stewart had been experimenting with successive wood maturation in the 1980s, and that idea became DoubleWood 12 in 1993. The bottle made Balvenie more than an old distillery and helped people understand cask finishing through flavor. The Balvenie story is not only about time spent aging, but also about the skill of moving time into another cask. The time of the hand does not end with one person. The maturation sense long held by David Stewart passed into the next generation through people such as Kelsey McKechnie. After 2022, the malt master role at the Balvenie no longer moved only by a name from the past. Tradition staying alive means the same question is handed to the next pair of hands. Next time you drink the Balvenie, you do not have to write down sweetness first. Behind that honeyed smoothness are years of turning barley, watching copper, choosing casks, and moving whiskey into another wood. The Balvenie sells the feeling that people still make whiskey before it sells a luxurious flavor. If a quiet sweetness remains after one sip, it may be the longest finish left by a human hand.